Hello and welcome to tonight's Get in Tune. I'm Michael Gracia and I have got a great show for you tonight. Um, I've got a guy, he's been in the business for years. He's done a lot of fantastic, uh, you know, work. He's an editor, he's a writer. I'm just going to bring him on. Let's welcome Brian Augustyn. Hey, Brian.
Excellent. Hey, how you doing, Michael?
Doing good. Thanks for coming on.
Sure. All I had to do was go to my back bedroom.
Before we get started, I just want everyone to know at any time throughout the show, you can follow Brian on Twitter at Brian Augustyn and on Facebook. Just look him up, Brian Augustyn. So, whoops, let me just, don't want to disappear that. So, I want to, before we get into some of the stuff we're going to talk about with your career,
Sure.
because there's a Kickstarter going on that you wrote the book to for Captain Midnight, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that, I want to get into kind of like your past, like what got you into comics? Were you who were your inspirations, or what writers were you looking at, as a kid? Like, what was your inspiration to bring you in the career?
Oh, well, I mean, it's I would say near Paleolithic era, the 1960s anyway. I think I discovered comics the way a lot of kids do, which is somebody else had comics and, shared them with me. And then I badgered my parents until they gave me enough allowance to cover my own growing needs. So I was probably, I was probably about 9, I guess, maybe 8. So we're talking 63, 64 in there. And at least at the time, I grew up in Chicago. At least at the time, Marvels were not as easy to find. And DC Comics were pretty much, well, the standard of the business. And so I started buying DC first, or borrowing them from my pals. But the idea from some kids who already knew more than I did was that there were these other comics out there. I just didn't find them initially. But I was a big fan of well, frankly, I was a big fan of the characters I eventually got to play with, Flash and Batman and the Justice League and books like that. I think the first one I ever bought after agonizing over a rack full of 2,000 comics was I bought an Action Comics, and kind of like Superman from the TV show. I was surprised that they had this comic book had the license to adapt the TV show, but not understanding that it was the other way around, of course. But I became a big comic book junkie and remain so to this day. Let's see, writers. I was reading a lot of entry-level science fiction in paperback. So I was reading, the school book club standards like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and then I've discovered Ray Bradbury and others on my own through the library. So, and Bradbury remains probably my preeminent favorite of all writers. And later discovered detective fiction, in which case, Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler. But when I was a kid, it was science fiction authors and comic book people. So I didn't know who was writing a good portion of what I was reading because it's pre-DC credits, but Gardner Fox and John Broome were writing pretty much everything I loved. Julius Schwartz was the editor. Who became one of my idols and eventually a pal when I got to DC.
No, that's awesome.
It was the coolest thing about going to work and for what you grew up loving was that I was just young enough when I got in to for a lot of the idols of my youth to still be around. So in some cases, I became very close friends, but at least I got to meet pretty much everybody. You know, Kurt Swan and used to
love
go
Curse One.
hang out after work and take Carmen Infantino to dinner every now and again. And as I say, Julie Schwartz was still in the office part-time, and we would hang out. So, I mean, that was all very cool, and it was leading in the direction of the ruination of my life, which is what my wife calls the whole comic book thing. But, I mean, I was nuts. I was a crazy comic book kid.
Yeah.
And, you know, like a lot of people, at least back in the days before personal computers, and the fact that I still call them personal computers is a little sad. We would, you know, we'd do hand-drawn comics for each other, for, you know, my pals and I. All of us, you know, only as good as an 8-year-old could be, or a 12-year-old could be in drawing comics, but we'd write these giant epics that made no sense whatsoever, and, you know, 1,000 characters, and the, you know, kids at school could get them 4 pages at a time as we produced them. So
that's great.
I got into the whole creating serial entertainment.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, that's what comics are. So
right.
Serial entertainment.
I mean, we didn't know we were doing it. It was as fast as we could work. So
yeah. No, that's great though that you did it even that early. So when you were growing up, you obviously, you know, you loved comics. Do you remember when you started like taking it seriously, like this is my career, and what you did to break into the industry?
Well, sure, I remember. That's closer than 1964. Well, I mean, let me just say that when I finally did discover Marvel about 1966, and it may or may not be an interesting fact that Marvel was dependent on DC's distribution company, a company owned by National. After their distributor crapped out on them in the late 50s, and before they made connections with another company in 1968. So the larger markets like Chicago had very sparse distribution. So in 67, 68, more and more Marvels became available. And I have to say that, you know, all the things that Marvel is famous for in the late 60s, you know, reaching out to the college age, to, you know, Stan Lee understanding the young people without them being children, integrating social stories and issues and things like that. That's what really opened my eyes to taking it seriously, because now I realize it wasn't just a way to divert or entertain, which is what comics were at the time. It was also a place where you could, well, tell more real stories, or at least more involved stories.
Yes.
So I would say somewhere around the 70s, while I was in high school and started to take myself more seriously, I recognized that if I wanted to do comics, I would have to, you know, view it as more than children's entertainment.
Okay. And when
the steps I took would be, I did fanzines and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. So you got together with people and you guys started making, like when you were kids, you were doing that with the fanzines, like friends getting together and doing stuff. Or you doing more like prose or?
No, I was drawing and writing my own comics.
Oh, okay.
I did have the pretension that I could draw. I never developed past a certain level, certainly not a professional level, but I could sort of cartoon my way through stuff. And I started contributing. A number of my friends had semi-regular fanzines, offset zine type stuff. And so I think my first effort was a Batman parody, trying really hard to be funny. I've looked back on it and it wasn't really that funny, but it was, I tried to think of the most absurd animal. So my hero was Aardvark Man.
And when you were, because I love parody. And just
Yeah,
curious,
you wouldn't have loved this.
do you? I mean, that's a lot of the work that I do is parody work.
Good.
Do you still have any of those around that might make an appearance on social media one day?
I'd have to dig. I may have one or two copies.
I'd love to see something like that back
I
then.
mean, I had the artwork, but by this point it was, all the balloons were rubber cemented on and corrections, and it's fallen apart and it's long gone. But I think I might have some copies.
Oh, that'd be all. If you can, just a post. I think people would love to see that. Not just the parody aspect of it, but just something from that era.
Well, it'd be easy enough to scan. It's only 3 pages long, but
oh, cool.
I haven't thought about it in a long time. But I'll look.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I'm not desperate for the attention, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
I did other stuff, none of it really notable.
Mm-hmm.
I went to art school convinced that I could learn more, and
where'd you go?
Chicago Academy of Fine Arts,
Okay.
which, let's see, Walt Disney went there.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Grell went there, and by the time I got there, the glory was long gone. But I had a couple of deep, capable and caring teachers, and that was nice.
That's great.
And shortly after, when First Comics opened up in Chicago, this would be somewhere in the 80s, I guess, 82, 83, we started submitting because we knew the people who were behind First Comics. I don't know if you remember First Comics from Chicago, but they were...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They did Warp and a handful of other things, including picking up... what was he called? E-Man from Charlton and another number of others. I mean, they made a go of it. Wheatley and Hempel did a book. I think they had one called Mars. They were a legit publisher, and Mike Gold, who had been a fixture on the Chicago fandom scene. We knew him from con organization and stuff.
Yeah.
But once he was there, we would submit strips. None of them ever went anywhere. But we made a connection with Mike. And then Mike got hired by DC in 86, maybe 85, to be their promotions guy.
Mm.
And once he was in New York, he, I have to say, unprompted by me, made the effort to get me hired. And so I got in by being persistently annoying in Chicago, and then having an influential friend move to DC corporate.
Well, and you started in the, I forgot the exact year, but mid to late 80s, correct? At DC, you were there.
87.
87, yeah, I think that's. And what was your first job working at DC? What were you doing for them?
I came on just as they were starting Action Weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I handled 2 of the strips, my first job. Mm-hmm. So I edited 2 of the weekly strips.
Okay.
What were they? 6 or 7 pages, something like that. I think I was editing Wild Dog and something else. I don't remember what the other one was. But I got to work with my pals, Al Collins and Terry Beatty, and that was fun. I mean, again, the beginning of a friendship, but it continues. And I don't recall the other strip, but then I was backstopping as an associate editor, Green Arrow and The Question, both books that Gold was editing by that point.
Okay. I'm trying to think back to that era of comics, because I started officially collecting in 1989.
So, you're a youngster.
I was born in 76. So when I was 13 when I started collecting. I remember I grew up in a town called Mahopac, New York, and the closest comic shop was in a town called Brewster, New York.
I know Brewster.
Yeah. And that was like 20 minutes from my house. And my father took me, and I remember my first comic I bought was, there were 2. It was 1989's Batman Annual and Teen Titans Annual. And the Teen Titans Annual, I remember, had it was like the secret origin of Nightwing, like the retelling of how he became Nightwing. And the Batman, I don't remember the story, but the cover sticks out. It was beautiful to me. It was Batman kind of just standing, I don't remember if he was in a field, like just on the ground, or if he was on top of a building, but it was snow, and the way his cape was blowing just really kind of stuck in my head.
Hard not to buy, right?
Yeah, and those two just and I was always a Batman and fan because of the Adam West, reruns, and growing up watching the Super Friends and those type of things. I was always a DC guy, so all my books kind of started over on DC. But I started buying older books when I got into it. Like in the next year or so collecting, I started looking and buying. So I'm trying to remember like the stuff that you're talking about with the Question and Green Arrow of that era. I'm trying to remember those books right now.
They were both, I think, larger books.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't the standard 32 page. I want to say they might have been 48 pagers. They were uppriced a little bit. If the regular books were, I don't know, $1 at that time, or whatever, these were maybe $2.25.
Mm-hmm.
And they both had backup features of one sort or another. The Question I remember best of all because I got to work with Denny O'Neil, who had been another one of my writer heroes from my younger days. And Denny was also on staff, and he eventually edited some stuff that I did, and I learned a lot. In fact, when I first got there, I don't know if he was told to or decided to. Denny was the man who gave me the ballooning lecture, how to indicate balloons for the letterer, and how you lead the story. I mean, it turned out, I thought, oh, how hard could this be? And then Denny sat me down, and it was an art, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, lettering. I've done a lot of different, and I've lettered, but it's my least favorite thing to do.
Well, I don't want to have to do it, but I could indicate balloons. Forever.
Yeah. So eventually you moved on, and not that they weren't great books that you just mentioned, Green Arrow and.
Well, they weren't my own titles. They were.
Yeah. But they're some of my favorite characters. But like I said, being these guys, you eventually moved on to things like the Flash and writing Batman stuff. Can you talk a little bit about working? You said you got to work on some of these favorite characters like Flash and Batman. Can you talk about how you got into that, whether it was through DC and your process working with them?
Well, with Flash, I mean, it's maybe the second comic I ever bought as a kid, as a 9-year-old or 10-year-old, was a Flash issue. And I became, that was, for whatever reason, it's, it's a fairly elemental fantasy to be able to move really fast. And unlike many comic book kids, I had aspirations of athleticism, and I eventually ran track in high school and things like that. Nowadays I can't, run to the bathroom, but, maybe I could do that. But at any rate, next to flight or invisibility, speed seemed to be a really cool power. And thanks to the dynamic art of Carmine Infantino, it was just engaging in the extreme.
Yeah.
And I think I collected every issue. I bought a lot of comics. I collected only a few, and Flash was one that I collected and saved. And all of Carmine's issues, which I want to think was like, I don't know, 100 issues or something like that. When I got to DC, Gold's office had relaunched the Wally West Flash in 86, 87, and it was being passed around the office. And so long as I was in Gold's group, I was able to campaign for it to come to me, and I got it. And then my bosses, Dick Giordano, and the bosses of all of us above Gold, Dick Giordano was our editor-in-chief, and Paul Levitz, who was the associate publisher, or assistant publisher, or vice president publisher, whatever he was at the time, saw that my talent or my interests, or my abilities, whatever, had really qualified me to move into the mainstream, the superhero stuff.
Yeah.
And so they moved me out, and I think I left a lot of the books behind that I was doing. But I hung on to Flash, and they let me because it belonged in the mainstream.
Yeah.
Now, when I was still in Mike's purview, I launched a new shadow book set in the 1930s, and a handful of other things. Created a book called El Diablo, and a bunch of stuff that either went the wayside or I left to other editors. But I entered the mainstream superhero stuff, clinging desperately to Flash, and eventually wound up editing the Justice League franchise as well.
Yeah.
So I think it was just persistence and a targeted annoyance.
Yeah, and that was throughout the. I'm just thinking your era of editing, like the Flash, was the late '80s into the '90s, and the JLA was that like the '90s stuff, or
they passed it to me after the successful era of Jim DeMatteis and Kevin. Yeah, I'm blanking on Kevin's name. Sorry. The Andy Helfer edited Justice League, which was very funny. And but by the time that those guys were done, DC had asked to bring it back into the mainstream. So that would be probably 1990.
Yeah.
Flash was I took over Flash in '88.
Okay. And I was, like I said, I was reading this stuff 89, but I was collecting into it. So we got
when you bought that Batman annual, by the way, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
You didn't buy the detective annual.
Was it the detective or Batman?
No. That wasn't the cover. The one you described was a great cover, but that same year, you said it was 89.
I believe so. I'm gonna look it up right now.
I did. Mark Waid and I got our first bylines writing the detective annual. It's the by now famous Ku Klux Klan cover.
Oh yes. No, that
I think that's 89 as well.
I'll have to look that up, but this one, let me find one that's not going to take me to eBay. If I click on it. No, it took me to something else. But oh God, I hate computers some days, Let me just share this.
Personal computers? Yes, they can be.
Yes.
They can be vexing.
So it was, where is it here? It's this one right here. That's the Batman I bought. That was my first Batman.
Yeah, it's the same year. Untold Stories or something like that.
Yeah, and I remember and now that I'm looking at it, you see they got the flowing of the cape, and he looks either cold or very sad. I can't tell in this picture now. I have to go find the book. That I've gotten rid of a lot of books in my life, but this one and that Teen Titans one were the two I never stopped. I never got rid of. I'll never, sell them because they were my.
Well, let's say when you made that choice, you ignored Mark Waid and Brian Augustyn's first DC comic.
No, I do have that. I do have that one. Let me look up. It was Detective Comics.
The annual, same year, the same cover format and everything. I don't remember the theme. I think it was Untold Stories or something.
And they're like on the guy's on a horse, right? As the cover. Yeah, I had that issue too, but I bought that one first. My first
right.
Yeah, my first trip was. Can I get a picture of it?
And the great pleasure was to be edited by Denny and be told, "Oh, you guys made this work." So we learned rules about storytelling.
Yeah.
You can't have a flashback within a flashback.
That's good to know.
And as the Untold Stories theme was all flashbacks. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that one.
They colored the sleeves red and didn't allow us to call them the Klan. Okay. But for all intents and purposes, that's the Ku Klux Klan cover, which is not as easy to say as I would have expected. No, so you can't have flashbacks within flashbacks. Something we didn't realize, and I think I see TV and movies doing it all the time. But that was Denny's rule, and the thing is, the mere fact that it was an untold story. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep wandering afield.
That's fine.
So
that's fine.
Feel free to jump in and wrangle me. The shtick was that it's an untold story, so it's all flashback.
Yeah.
And we wrote a genuine mystery, which again, Denny said, I don't think that can happen in comics. But we wrote what Wade, who's this huge Ellery Queen type mystery fan, calls a Playfair mystery. And we did this, real suspects and real clues, but the whole thing depended on young Bruce Wayne, who was not yet Batman in the story, telling how he solved the crime, which required flashback.
Yeah. And
Denny said, nope. And we're like, how can we tell the story? So we put it, just put our minds to it, and we solved the problem by doing an illustrated narrative, which wasn't a flashback.
Yeah.
Even though it was Bruce in the foreground, and behind him in black and white were the images that told that particular, what he was narrating.
Yeah.
It was happening in real time. The images were like one removed from being part of the genuine narrative. And then he went, okay, you did it. You solved it.
But that's great to have an editor not only have a certain rule, but challenge you to figure out ways to solve problems to enhance your story.
And we learned from a master that way.
Yeah. No, that's great. I actually have a friend. I'll share this story real quick, and I won't say the editor who it is because I'm friends with them too. But I have a friend. He wrote a story for this company, and he thought it was a great story. He gives it to the editor. The editor, I don't want to say tore his story apart, but found all these holes and said, you need to fix this and do this, and gave him all these great suggestions on how to go, but challenged him also, just like Denny did for you, on how to solve this problem. And he gives me a call after he fixed it, and he got the approval for the comic to be drawn. And he goes, let me tell you, I was having this comment, and he tells me the whole story, and he goes, I really hate this guy. But you know what I hate about him? Is that he's so good, that he knows how to like, he doesn't actually hate the guy. He like, I love this person, how he did, but I hated that process, but it made him a better writer. And he's like, I love this guy, because
I think I've more than once encountered, and maybe this story about Denny is one. We don't want to stretch. We don't want to, even if we can tell ahead of time, well, we'll benefit from this.
Yeah.
We always resist that pull into uncharted territory. But it's it's the only way it works.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And I have some friends who are, I love that they're editors and stuff. They do some great stuff. They've never edited my work though, thankfully. I'd be scared to.
So you might have learned things, or maybe not. I mean, among the things I've learned over time from some editors, I will not name them, is that they were terrible. That's what I learned. They were terrible editors. They didn't understand story.
Well, the thing for me is, being an artist, I mean, I write too, but I do more of the artwork. I tend to look, be like an art director. So I tend to edit art, and talk to artists about that. So I look at that and visually and when I have taught, lots of stuff. I did college for a long time. And I will say this about both the people who I was the art director for and the teacher for. They hated me when it came to critiques because I had such a good eye. I could pick out every little thing that needed to be fixed, and it drove them nuts. But
I had my share of driving artists, especially nuts. So there's a great deal of pleasure in that. I did work with, and in some cases discover a lot of great artists though. So
yeah. I mean,
I once drove Joe Quesada nuts long before he was running Marvel. He was drawing the Ray
Mhm.
miniseries, and then when they made a regular series, he was a cover artist. And by
Yeah.
the time it was a regular series, I was editing it,
Mhm.
and he brought in a cover. And it, the process for covers at DC at the time was, at the very least, I would sit down with the cover editor and discuss the story, and the cover editor, who was an artist, would sketch it up. Or if the artist was local, he could come in and sit in on those meetings. And so Joe was there. He sketched up what we were talking about for the cover, and then he delivered. And by this time, he was on, just about to explode.
Mhm.
I mean, he was already a great artist and doing some
Yeah.
notable stuff, but he was just about to go to Marvel and a few other places where he was going to get really big.
Yeah.
And I think he had gotten to a place where he was pressed for time, or he shortcutted it to the point where it was no longer the cover we discussed, and it was no longer, not even really a cover worth having. It was like a single isolated image of the character that had no story content at all. So he brought it in, and I think by this point he was turning that corner where people weren't saying no very often.
Yeah.
And I said, this isn't what we agreed on.
Yeah.
I said, please redo it, because if I have to pay somebody else to redo it, that's a check you're not going to get.
Yeah.
I don't think I was quite that harsh. I think I always tried to be as paternal as possible.
Mhm.
But I told him, come on, man, this is not what you committed to.
Yeah.
And so he went back and drew the sketch, and it was a beautiful cover. And years later, when he and our pal Jimmy Palmiotti started, I'm trying to remember what their sub series at Marvel was called, Marvel Knights, I guess. Yes.
Mhm.
When they started, he had offered me the editing job there. I had left DC by that point, so 97 maybe.
Okay.
And I just left DC because I didn't want to commute. I had little kids at home, etc. But I appreciated it, and they announced. He said that the reason I was being offered the job was because I had told him no once. So
Really?
apparently he appreciated it.
No, that's great.
So
That's great.
I don't hear very often that I was good. No, that's not true. I had a great relationship with my people.
No, that's great. I actually wanted to ask you. I was reading, a little bit to get to learn more about you than what I already knew about the work. I didn't know this about you, but you I guess it was through DC. I think DC owned the line. You edited the Impact comic stories.
I was one of the editors. Yes.
Yeah, one of the, and you were which titles? Because when that came out and they brought back those,
The Archie heroes.
The Archie heroes and stuff. I always loved those characters. So I bought those books up like crazy. Which ones were you working on? Do you remember?
Yes. Did the Fly,
Okay.
Comet, and Jaguar.
Yeah, Comet I read regularly. Love that one.
That was, the late great Tom Lyle was the artist and writer.
Yeah.
And this young guy named Wade I think came in to do dialogue on that book. But that was a great deal of fun, and that was during the last days of my connection with Mike Gold's group.
Mm-hmm.
And Gold envisioned the Impact line.
And were you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you: were you a fan of those characters growing up? Like, did you read them as well? And then, was it something that was like, I got to work on something from my childhood that I loved?
No, that's true. I mean, by '67, superheroes were everywhere.
Yeah.
And the Archie line, which I think called themselves Radio Comics at first, to differentiate, were doing their darndest to copy Marvel. So the people who worked on their books were, not Stan Lee, but one was Vic G or something like that. Victor Gorelick, who had been there forever. And I bought them. They were not great comics. They were all drawn by one guy who clearly was being rushed. And I mean, they did 2 or 3 a month. I don't know how even Jack Kirby, tried to keep it to a minimum of 3 a month, and he was fast. But I ate that stuff up at that point. I was at 13 maybe when it was coming out, 12.
Yeah.
67, 13. And like I said, I bought everything comic book. I bought the Captain Marvel who split into pieces, the android who broke up into pieces. I bought Fat Man, the human flying saucer. If it was even vaguely superhero when I was in my young teens, I was buying it. So I knew the Archie characters very well, and loved them well enough.
Yeah. Did you have any like rules from, and this goes for any of the characters that you worked on? Were there any rules in place about, specifically, whether it's you're talking with the DC characters or the Impact characters? And I know DC has the rules that they had to fit a certain mold. Like, okay, so in the 60s they were this. How do you keep them kind of close to what they were in the 60s, but revamp them for a modern era? Were there any like rules like that?
At DC, there were not many. I mean, you had the flagship characters.
Yeah.
That it was more about tone than it was about detail.
Mm-hmm.
I never wound up editing Superman or Batman. I did wind up editing Wonder Woman for a time, which I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And maybe because it had gone through that book had gone through a lot, many efforts by many people over the years. George Perez had a great run, and when George left, the book afterwards didn't do as well. Yeah. But we couldn't turn her into a mean vigilante or anything like that. Yeah. In fact, I was working with Bill Loebs, and the effort was to turn her into sort of like recognize the Earth Mother quality, that sort of, but that's built into the character. Somehow later on, she wound up wearing black biker shorts and
was
looking like, I don't remember who was responsible for that, but we wouldn't have gone there. But hey, they got to, so I guess the rules were less evident. Archie didn't put any. The attitude was basically you're creating them as you wish, tie into the characters, but you make them your version.
Okay.
So we were able to. We said we were selling it to kids, so we entry level. So we didn't. Very little hacking off of arms and things like that. I mean, the Black Hood was scary. It was great, but it was I thought very intense. But the rest of the books were they were dramatic. They were not Sugar and Spice or whatever.
Yeah,
they weren't Sugar and Spike either. But
now, before we move on to the Captain Midnight book, I think we need to just go into one of the books you're most known for, which is this one right here, Gotham by Gaslight. Can you talk to a little bit about like how that came about and what it was?
It's it's by now an oft-told story, but I think it's interesting in that it started out not to be anything at all. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say not to be anything, but it was going to just be a story in an annual. Okay. Mark Waid and I shared an office and a brain, I think, at least sensibilities. And we were both fanboys, but we also knew better than to just cave in to our fanishness. Now, when I took over the Flash, I eventually had Mark write the Flash, and that's when we really turned the book around. Mm-hmm. But he was editing a book at the time at DC called Secret Origins, and fairly close to the last minute, he got the very first summer annual, and this was just after he had finished I think tying in with one of the movies, maybe after you just finished doing the Batman family and the villains. And it's like, well, what's left to do for special? So when he was in the office and I had other work, but like I say, we shared a brain, we were passing it back and forth what it should be. And we weren't coming up with characters that would make an annual worthwhile. Because again, he had also recently done the Superman stuff.
Yeah.
So is anyone going to consider an annual special if it's all about, Aqualad or something? No offense to Aqualad fans if they're out there. But we didn't come up with anything the first day. And Mark at that time was prone to hand wringing and sweating with, like, oh, what am I going to do? He's much more mature now. He's, up to about the age of 18, 19 by now, mentally. Anyway, he calls me up at home, like at 9:00 at night, and not that was a problem. No children at the time, and I'm still a night owl. So he goes, I got it. And he was reading, I don't remember who, but he was reading an alternate history, science fiction about the Civil War or something. And he goes, we can do alternate history. And I said, oh, okay, now that's possible. What, like what? And interestingly, the first thing that he came up with was Superman lands in Russia, or Kal-El lands in Russia. Now that story eventually happened, as I recall, as an Elseworlds. Red Sun, I think it was.
Red Sun, yes. I remember reading that.
And I don't think it was public that Mark had mentioned it. So whoever pitched it, I don't know if they got that from Mark or what. James Robinson, somebody like that. I don't recall.
I don't remember.
I mean, it was a good story, but it was a good idea. I just, I wasn't thinking of writing anything. I was just listening and spitballing with Mark. And I said, oh, I know it would be good. Batman's a very gothic character. What about Victorian era Batman? Now, this is pre-steampunk, so I didn't have anything specifically in mind. And he goes, oh, that's good. What would that be? And I said, just top of my head, I said, Batman versus Jack the Ripper.
Nice.
and there was a pause, and Mark said, say more. I said, he escapes London, comes to Gotham, ... And we tossed it around a little bit, nothing particular. Yeah. But as soon as I hung up, I realized, oh, wait a minute, I know the story. And I sat down at my electric typewriter. I used a computer in the office, but at home I didn't own one in 1988. And I typed out like a 2-page synopsis.
Okay.
Just unasked for. Wasn't yet thinking of writing it. It was, Mark didn't say, oh, good, you write that up. It was just, we'll talk about it again tomorrow. Yeah. So when I showed up at the office, I gave him the 2 pages, and it was essentially the story as it was developed. Some things changed through editing. Yeah. Some things changed thanks to the artist bringing stuff to the table. But he just read it. And I don't know why. I think because it was an odd story. Mark was still thinking of this as an annual.
Okay.
But he was answerable to Giordano, and he wanted to make sure it would be okay to do a story that was alternate history. So he sent a copy of the 2 pages into Dick, and we were summoned shortly thereafter. And Dick said, this isn't an annual. And we thought, oh, okay, well, we tried. And he goes, you don't waste this on an annual. Now, at that time, they had something that they called prestige format.
Okay.
That was sort of like smaller, smaller than 100 pages, graphic novel type stuff.
Okay.
And he goes, if you could find the right artist, this should be a prestige graphic novel. Now, I want to remember, Mark has never corrected this memory, that the minute we left Dick's office thinking, who are we going to get? Mike Mignola was walking down the hallway, coming in to deliver the last pages of Cosmic Odyssey, which he was doing for Mike Carlin. And we said, when you're done, come see us. And he said, I have no time. No time. I've got to go on. I'm doing a Wolverine graphic novel for Marvel. I said, just come and talk to us. So he comes in. He probably should have been suspicious because the minute he came in, Wade slammed the door shut. And we go, we just want you to listen to this story, this pitch. And then we sort of rope-a-doped him, giving him a back and forth delivery of the story. And then at the beginning, he's like, I've got no time to take on new projects. I can't do it. I'm committed. There's no way. Just listen. Just listen. Yeah. So we're doing the story. We're doing the pitch. And somewhere about the halfway through the pitch, Mike goes, no. Instead of that, it should be a horse chase. And then he paused and he goes, oh, crap, I'm drawing this book, aren't I? And as it turns out, yeah, he was drawing the book. Yeah. And he called up his Marvel editor and said, you have to reschedule. I got this other thing that I have to do. And God bless him, he did it. And
wow.
I'm not sure that we would have gone ignored, but Mike definitely made sure that we were memorable. His art was, exactly perfect.
Yeah, I mean, who isn't a fan of his work? I don't think, but
it was early then, but he was still
but you could see
right on the edge of
he
was the perfect guy.
Yeah, you could see what was coming from him in that, and I mean, it was beautifully illustrated. I wish I had one of my copies just to pull out and look at right now. I think I've like I said, I think I have like 2 issues somewhere in this room.
Well, I've got copies put away. I've also got that one that you showed before is the hardcover that came out last year. They do new issues. They did. Did you ever see the Gotham By Gaslight Noir, which is a big upsized thing, all black and white inside?
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that version.
Yeah, it was not a cheap book. They do send me, out of their largesse, they send me 2 or 3 copies of things nowadays. That's but nice. It continues, and as you mentioned to me when we were talking before, it became a movie or animated movie.
And do you mind me asking, what'd you think of the animated version?
It's everybody has been, not everybody, but many great authors, Hemingway, John O'Hara, people like heavyweight American writers, have been adapted to film, or adaptation is a separate thing. Mm-hmm. I would say the germ and the spirit of the book is definitely preserved in the animation. I liked 99% of what they did. There was at least one thing I would have done if I had thought of it, mm-hmm. which was the inclusion of Selina Kyle, which I thought was perfect and wonderful. And I mean, we had 48 pages, so we did a fairly stripped down version of the idea.
Yeah.
And on top of it, although it's not often mentioned, the animated film also included stuff taken from the sequel, mm-hmm. At least in terms of settings and, the big fire at the World's Fair and all that stuff came from Master of the Future, the follow-up.
Yeah.
But no, I was happy with it. And again, the inclusion of Selina Kyle was brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about the reveal, about the unmasking of the villain.
Yeah.
But again, it became a new thing when it was an adaptation. And
I get that. I get everything changes, a little bit. Can't do everything exactly. I mean, even look at Lord of the Rings, which I'm a huge fan of. Certain things were not in the books that were in the movies, and certain things from the books weren't included into the movie. That
it's space.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that makes the best movies are short stories.
Yeah.
But in something like Lord of the Rings, these are enormous novels, they still have Well, I mean, at least Jackson decided they needed what 6 hours a piece or whatever. Those movies are very long.
Yeah.
So he fleshed them out. A lot of the stuff that gets fleshed out in film tends to be stuff that you're implying or inferring between the cracks of the story. They needed to expand this into 2 hour or whatever it was, Gotham by Gaslight, into that running time. And, I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not offended. I don't know that it could have worked out with my solution anyway, because it was, it was a Playfair mystery, but it wasn't it wasn't it was a Scooby-Doo mystery really in the book. So,
but there's nothing wrong with Scooby-Doo.
No, but in terms of, Sherlock Holmes,
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo, the complexity factor is very different.
Well, I want to get into now what you're currently working on. I'm going to share the Kickstarter that you currently have going on. Now, this
Right.
Kickstarter is you're the writer on this book here for Captain Midnight. The artist is our mutual friend Jay Piscopo, and it's for Public Domain Comics, who Chris Watts was on the show a few weeks back, who runs Public Domain Comics. Which you're almost at your goal. Which is fantastic.
I need to interrupt you for a minute, Michael.
Yeah, go
ahead. Your sound is in and out just now, so I didn't catch a lot of what you said.
Let me just make sure.
It's that weird metallic kind of echoey.
Yeah, hold on.
Flanging.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just repeat what I was saying. So, you wrote the Captain Midnight. It's drawn by our mutual friend Jay Piscopo.
Jumpin' Jay Piscopo.
Jumpin' Jay Piscopo.
That's what I just decided to call him.
And it's for Public Domain Comics, which is Chris Watts' company. Right. And I had Chris Watts on a few weeks ago. Great guy. And can you tell, before, we're going to look at the Kickstarter a little more in detail, but how did this project come about?
Well, as you know, Jay Piscopo, Jumpin' Jay Piscopo, is sort of tirelessly creative. God bless him. And he and I have worked on things before, a lot of which never happened, a few things that did. Mm-hmm. But we're very good friends, and we share sensibilities on sort of the classic nature of some kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. And he approached me on this saying, I want to do a book that crosses over some PD characters, public domain characters.
Yeah. And
include, I think you wanted to include his own creation, Captain Nemo? Whatever. I'm blanking
Captain
now.
Eli.
Captain Eli. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Jumpin'. Captain Eli. I don't think Captain Eli's in it. It's the he's commenting that he's finally got a nickname. Is
it Sea Ghost in here?
God, I'm looking like a complete and utter idiot right now. Jay, tell us, please.
Yeah, in the comments, tell us who.
But he wanted to include Airboy and Captain Midnight and a few others. And when we put that all together, I think we came up with, we added in one or two original characters. Commander X.
Commander X, yes.
See, my problem is his real name is unknown and he just goes by X. And no, I blanked. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jay. Anyway, we're getting more commentary. Yeah. And he just wanted to do this giant gang characters versus Nazis. Mm-hmm. So we put it all together, and again, it's a big gushy, great kind of old school heroes versus god awful villains. I think we wound up creating at least one. We came up with the British ally hero, Britannia,
which is this female right here.
Yes. She was sort of plugged into the mythology of Britain itself. And Jay said, Commander X is the man with the cheesy mustache.
Yeah.
I think my mustache is pretty cheesy too, so he shouldn't feel bad. So we created Britannia. We came up with some Nazi villainy that was pretty cool, including I don't remember because we did do this a little while back. There was a villain called Stuka who might have been an android or robot who was basically a robot, a human-shaped robot that flew and blasted things like strafing. Anyway, it's a big messy story and it's great. And Jumpin' Jay gets to include a lot of his favorite characters in sort of semi-shadowed cameo in the early parts of the stories, including the Marvel family and things like that. Maybe not the entire family. I don't remember if Uncle Marvel was there, but we put the story together. I'm pretty sure Jay put it out in a limited edition. Now, this thing with PD is it's 100-page super spectacular, and it includes not just our story, which I don't recall the page count of our story, but it was at least 22, 24 pages. But it also includes another 50 or so pages of Golden Age reprints of Captain Midnight's original, I guess, Fawcett Comics appearances.
Was Fawcett his first appearance? I'm trying to remember.
I think it is Fawcett.
Yeah,
yes,
because he started, if memory serves, he started as a radio show.
Right.
Yeah, and he was just a pilot. He didn't have his air suit until
until he was a comic, right?
Yeah, until he was a comic. Yeah.
I've never seen the entirety of the Captain Midnight serial.
Yeah, neither have I. I gotta watch it.
I've seen stills and stuff, and he's just wearing, the black leather flight jacket and that old cap with goggles and stuff like that. No, that the flight suit and all that, that's strictly comics.
Yeah.
I picked up a couple of issues, beat up issues. So I have certainly seen it, like many things of the Golden Age. Some good art, some what the hell were they thinking art? And but it's an interesting character.
Yeah.
And between the radio show and the comics, they really developed a lore, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The secret codes and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. They, what was it? Just for the audience who doesn't know, this is when they had I don't want to call them decoder rings, but they had a decoder badge.
Disc.
A
disc.
Yeah,
disc. A badge.
Yeah. And I remember reading when I was looking into the history of Captain Midnight. This was this is even before I found out you and Jay were working on this. Was it World War II? They started taking those decoder rings, or decoder badges, because they were made of brass. So if there's any original ones, they're hard to find.
Oh, they were melting them down for the war effort.
For the war effort. And then after the war ended and they went back to the radio show, they made a new one. So those are somewhere in existence, but they were slightly different shaped. So
I did not know that.
So yeah, one looked like more of a badge, and then the second one was more circular and kind of had maybe a star pattern. I remember the image.
I've only seen pictures. That's why I said disc.
Yeah.
Other outfits did. I don't recall. I couldn't tell you which radio characters or comic strip characters had decoder rings, but those. Yeah. Dick Tracy might have had a decoder ring. I think Spy Smasher also did that thing through the comics.
Yeah.
Where you got secret messages with the decoder, whatever it was.
Yeah.
What was the name of the electric company? Shiloh North Decoder, and one of the great character names, not Shiloh North Dakota. I don't know why I'm now explaining someone else's joke, but it always cracked me up.
You know what? I want to show this now, just so you guys know at home. I have, for some reason, whenever I do my headphones, when I go on here, we can't hear the sound play for some reason. But this is a short video showing a lot of Jay's work, kind of about what the story is, and it's just some instrumental music behind it. So it's not long. I think it's a minute, if I remember correctly. So I just want to play it so you guys can see, you know, a little bit more of the art going on in here.
Great. Epic hero music.
Yes, so that was, I mean, Jay's got gorgeous work. I mean, I've told him that when he's on my show, people just tell him constantly.
His talent and his sensibilities are exactly perfect for this kind of thing. Frankly, exactly perfect for everything he likes to do. But he is, you know, this sort of throwback without that being an insult. I think it's a good thing. I mean, he and I agree on what public domain heroes, the value of those. I mean, yeah, you could create from scratch. And, you know, I don't know that I feel constrained to, I mean, other than in a case of something like Captain Midnight, who's got all this lore. But to recreate some of the, so we say, the secondary heroes of public domain, even if they're lesser known, there's some weight in their original existence.
Yeah.
So, you know, redoing something like the Black Hood, I don't know if he's available, versus a character of your own called the Red Mask or whatever.
Yeah.
There's less, at least less draw for me. I really like it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of public domain. I think that's one of the things Jay and I, you know, connected on. But as someone who, you know, created comics, created his own characters, excuse me, it's sometimes difficult, and then you want to try to bring readers in for a character that you want to get them invested in. But how do you get them invested if they know nothing really? So, you know, the people are taking a chance. When you bring a public domain character in, there is history behind them, you know, like you were saying. So it's,
I'm not sure the reader always gets that initially, but it adds some level of weight.
Yeah. So we're looking here, and these are the main characters. So this would be his Commander X, I believe, right?
Let's see.
Midnight.
On my screen, this stuff is very small.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's kind of small on mine. I'll see if I can enlarge it a bit. There we go.
Yeah, that's Captain Midnight, Commander X, Britannia, Airboy.
I don't know what he calls this version. I think Thunderman he calls him.
Something like that.
Yeah, he says
Bullet Man is there.
And Bullet Girl. Or Bullet Woman. What is it? Bullet Girl, I think, right?
I don't recall. Probably Bullet Girl, the original anyway.
Yeah.
And then...
I don't remember who this is here.
Star Spangled.
Okay.
Somebody. I don't know what he's called. Don't remember.
And I'm assuming this is the Raven he was talking about, or in the comments he says the Raven, or is he talking about something else? I don't know. Did we miss something, Jay? And then we got
he may be talking about other characters we've discussed.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that looks to me like Minuteman, the red, white, and blue.
Okay.
Not sure.
Yeah, that might be.
I'm not sure who the girl is.
Yeah.
Unless she's, you know, Marie Marvel or something. That's the main villain. The middle there is Jay's Commander X's main villain, who I'm sorry again, Jay. And then Stuka is the last character.
Okay.
A really great design by Jay. So that second level is, as it says, the villains.
And here come the rewards. And I got to say, I haven't donated to this yet. I plan to. And I do want to read it. But to be honest, this poster right here is my all-time favorite thing I've seen from Jay, and I just want this poster.
Please don't ask me to identify those characters.
I've had them on here, and we've tried to talk about a few. I get them wrong
Valkyrie.
Sometimes.
The brunette there was Valkyrie. Jay's told
Valkyrie.
us.
Okay,
and she's from the Airboy universe.
Yeah. So, because I know some characters in here, like we were talking about the Comet earlier. That's him right there. There's the Ray, but I don't know if you're using those names. I got Captain see Captain Battle.
This is the Last Dominion. This goes a little beyond the Captain Midnight stuff. Yeah. So these are characters Jay has recreated or resurrected and I don't know all of their histories.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be Doll Man there. Like I can go through a few of them, but not. I need Jay to.
I'm seeing him so tiny. I mean, I can probably name a lot of them, but
what I need is for Jay to have a piece that comes along with this, where their names.
The legend or whatever they call
like
that.
A little legend, something like that.
I mean, like a map legend or a.
Yeah.
Jay, you can't stop Jay. He just keeps rolling.
No, I know. I look at it,
and I'm glad he does.
Yeah, I tell him all the time. I can't imagine. Like he posts so much constantly. I'm like, where does he find the time? And it's always like new stuff.
Well, he doesn't. I'm pretty sure he doesn't sleep. I mean, if you look at a picture, there's his eyes are hot and fervid, and he's ready to create a drop of a pen or something. I think that he's a master of much art and including CGI stuff. So he's got his robot servants as well.
Is he calling him the Big Red Cheese or Thunder? That's his name.
Thunder. He's not the Big Red Cheese. He's the large Scarlet Roquefort or something. I don't know.
And then here, one of the levels that you can get a reward, I guess, is an Airboy, like Mego looking figure.
They are, they're exactly Mego specs. He's got Doc Mego produces that stuff. The guy, a collector.
So we look at. He does look tired in that picture, I guess.
I didn't say look tired. I say he looks a little, crazed in a good way. He's got kind of a Rasputin-y thing going on.
Oh yes, totally on that one.
Whereas I'm wearing shades and I just look like a jazz musician.
There's nothing wrong with that. Then we got, and that's Chris, who I guess doesn't.
Apparently has a skin condition of some sort.
So let's check out what these people can get by pledging. All right. So
absolutely.
Because this is the important thing. Let's get you guys pledging here. So for $5, you get the Captain Midnight Commander X PDF. So that's a copy of the 32-page full-color original story by you and Jay. So between the Commander X and the Captain Midnight, it's a 32-page book.
There you go.
And then
I'm old. My memory is shot. So
it's okay. And for $10, you're level 2, you get the PDF of the 100-page Spectacular.
Wow.
For $20, we're going to get the 100-page Spectacular print, the 11x17 poster, and the trading card set.
That's a 3-card, I think, or is it more?
Yes. It's 3 cards. Where was it? It was on here. So here they are. So it's Midnight, Britannia, and Commander X.
Right.
Are the 3 cards.
So you get the print edition, you get the cards,
and you get
the poster
for $20.
Well, there you go. That's how you get your poster.
Yep. And for $25, you get all that, but you also add in the Wiz Comics Golden Age Archive Volume 1 and 2 PDF, and a Captain Midnight PDF archive. You go up to 40. What's added in on that is Airboy, the Warriors Golden Age PDF archive, and Love and Bullets PDF.
That looked like Bullet Man and Bullet Girl.
Maybe. I'm not familiar with.
Well, I think they were on the cover of the comic.
Okay.
It's just below where you are now on the screen.
Yeah. Where is it here? The cover was right up here. Yeah, so there they are. Yeah.
Okay.
Then level, was it $75? What's the difference here? Or did I think I read the 75. For 100, you're adding in the Heroes for the Airboy Mego action figure.
There you go.
Everything from previous. And for 150, we go even higher than that. You got a Commander X Mego along with the previous, so the Airboy. Oh, and there's also the Midnight Marvel Matinee DVD, which I believe is the Captain Midnight. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the Captain Midnight or the Captain Marvel stories? For 200, what's the difference here? I'm trying to see here. You'll get the Captain print, Airboy print, the DVD, the Airboy action figure. I'm confused on what's the difference here. I'm sorry. You guys are offering so much. I'm confused at what was added there. He said it's the Captain. Chris Watts is watching, and he said
Captain Midnight Special serial,
which I need to watch. So for 250, yeah, I'm there's so much here. You guys just go on, look at this stuff, man, and then you got a $500 or more, which is just fantastic. Great stuff. You only went live like earlier this week, correct?
A couple of days ago.
Couple of days, Sunday, I think it was.
Yeah.
And you're now, less than $400 away from your goal, so that's awesome. So, congratulations on that.
Well, I can't say anything other than thank you to the supporters who got charged up just in the most amazing way. So thanks a lot. There's also the Jay's Heroes for Heroes thing, which he has to explain better than I can. Yeah. But I mean, there's some beneficiary there that goes to.
Well, Jay will be coming back hopefully sometime in August here, and we will be learning more about that. Jay also said we get his kidney. Are
we? Do you get the good one or the other one?
Well, Jay, as someone who has already had a couple of kidney transplants, can you hold off just in case?
I was just going to say, actually, Michael probably could use that.
Yeah,
so.
let's hold on. I mean, let's hope it's a long time away, but anyone, so let's be safe there.
If you live within a mile or two of me, mm-hmm. I'll come to your house and bore you with stories about comic books.
This is great. Now, you were, we were talking, you read public domain, characters and stuff. Before getting into this Captain Midnight story, how much of a fan of Captain Midnight were you?
I was aware of the character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the unspoken influences on me in all of this kind of stuff, including comics, was my dad. And my dad was, before the term geek existed, my dad was, he was a guy who read comics into his 20s. Okay. And he loved old time radio. And in Chicago, there was back before FM was a really big deal, FM radio, one of the channels regularly played old time radio serials. Mm-hmm. So once a week, or if it was a Saturday show or something, I don't recall, but he and I would get in the car and drive nowhere in particular so that we could listen to The Shadow or Captain Midnight or any number of the great radio heroes.
Yeah.
He read pulps and would tell me about them. He was a fan. My dad was a fan of Captain Midnight for sure.
Yeah.
He was one of those things where I don't recall, but I guess in the radio show it was Captain Midnight. I don't think my dad could say the character's name without giving it the radio intonation.
We're gonna ask that question in a moment.
Jay's being nosy now.
We're gonna because I'll tell you, Jay, that's a question I was gonna ask in a moment too. But I wanted to finish up the story and share a little story with you. But go ahead.
So I knew about the character through my dad.
Yeah.
And because of his fan, we used to buy him when I was an adult. We would buy him cassette tapes. That's how long ago this was, of radio shows.
Yeah.
And we bought him a set, like 3 tapes that were, a dozen Captain Midnight stories or something.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of the character, liked the character because of that, and so on. Just to give tribute to my dad, who's long gone at this point. When I started buying comics, my parents, who were born in the 30s, my mom too, had enough knowledge about comics. I mean, the very first comic I bought was my mom gave me a dime, and I discovered when I got to the drugstore that it was 12 cents. So I figured I have to con her out of the next 2 pennies. But when I started buying them in number, about once a month, my dad would come to my room and say, "What do you got? What's new?" And he would take a big stack of my comics away and read them.
That's great.
So I think you have to say that mine was not one of those childhoods that where the comics were burned or thrown away. My parents, encouraged it. And when I started making my own and stuff, my dad was one of the people who would read the stuff I created.
Yeah.
In fact, I was at DC for a few years before he passed, and he used to call me at the office just to talk to me and ask me what I could see out my window. And not like it was just a big deal to a boy from Chicago whose kid now has a Manhattan office overlooking Broadway or whatever.
Yeah.
He told me he was proud of me, and that, that's enough of the weeping for the show. I mean, there's nothing better than being allowed to be creative.
Yeah.
By your parents, and not, there are too many horror stories from too many people. And, there are plenty of issues all people have with their kids and all kids have with their parents, but I can't complain.
Yeah. No.
So to Jay's question, do we want to go to that now, or?
Sure. I mean, I was going to show you, but I can tell you off air. It's not a big deal.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think, because you were talking about how you public domain, how your father, really, brought you in and kind of showed you this world. I have to say, my father, he wasn't a comic guy. I mean, I don't want to say he still isn't. He's still around. He's going to be 80 this year. So
good for him.
He grew up.
I think I'll be 80 on my next birthday. I could be wrong.
He grew up, in the, in similar era as your parents, and he didn't buy comics. That was my uncle, his brother, and when we would go visit his family, my Uncle Joe, he was the artist of the group. We'd sit together and we'd draw comics and stuff. But it was because of my father and his family that I got into public domain stuff young as a kid. Because when I was a kid and we go visit, and we were there on a Sunday, I believe, Channel 11 would always show those old black and white Tarzan movies, right?
WPIX.
Yes, WPIX, the Tarzan films. And I got into loving those old stuff. So anytime like a serial came on that I didn't know, like early Saturday morning, Sundays, whatever it was, I would watch that stuff. So I was watching at 10 years old the Buster Crabbe, Flash Gordon, and whatever popped on. And then
Yeah, we
And
got all of that in WGN in Chicago.
Okay. I don't know if that was what I watched it on. Because
No,
I had,
WGN wasn't a super station.
wasn't yet. It eventually became one though.
It
It
still
eventually
is, yes, I guess,
yeah.
yeah.
But I don't know. But I don't know when it was because having cable, you get whatever channels. I don't remember where I watched them on as a kid, but I ended up getting the tapes of the radio shows because my father said he grew up loving the radio. So just like you, I'd get my dad's tapes every now and then for his birthday, and I would take them and listen to them. So I grew up watching listening to the Shadow stuff, and a Lone Ranger, and all these things that and even comedy. Looking at Burns and Allen, Abbott and Costello, all that came from my dad's side of the family, and having my dad into that stuff. So it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have been looking at the older comics. I don't think I'd be looking at the older movie serials. And I learned all that, and all my interests in the public domain and all these things came from spending time with my dad and his side of the family.
Well, what it boils down to is that stuff for those of us who are fans now is that's our heritage, in a big way. Not just the public domain, obviously.
Yeah.
Superman is the original costumed hero, and he's not public domain. Although I guess that first issue is, or some
it will be
weird,
soon.
Convoluted. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, once that first issue is public domain, you can't use the character. I think you'll be able to reprint that story.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. There's so many permutations and angles. But the bottom line is, and that's the sort of thing that I couldn't quite put into words, and I'm listening to you and I'm realizing this is our heritage. It's passed down from the previous generations. If I think I would have discovered comics simply because of the neighborhood I lived in, but once I did, my parents both filled me in. I mean, there was a time when I thought my mom was just nuts because she was saying, I know what it was. When DC published republished a Golden Age character called the Spectre. You certainly know the character.
Love the Spectre, yeah.
My mom looked at me while I was sitting at the table reading that comic, and she goes, "That name sounds familiar." And then she came over and she leaned over me to look at it. She goes, "Oh, this is something else." And I said, "Well, what are we talking about?" And she says, "Well, when I was a kid in the 1940s, there was a strip about a guy with a similar name. I don't remember what it was. That he was sort of a detective with a mask, and it came with the Sunday paper. It wasn't a traditional." I'm like, "The Spirit, Mom."
Yeah.
And my mom knew about the spirits. I mean, I was plugged into a pretty heavy vein of pop culture.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom and dad were young enough. Mom listened to rock and roll radio when I was a kid. She was a big fan of the Beatles. That doesn't go on to explain how she became somebody who in later years was watching Lawrence Welk reruns. But when she was shy of 30, she was into rock and roll radio.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of that stuff makes up who we are. Movies, music, and for those of us who have that expanded consciousness of pop culture, radio, movies, and definitely comic books.
Yeah.
And TV, of course. I mean, one thing I do know is I was watching a Captain Midnight program on television without knowing it was Captain Midnight. There was a TV show, Captain Midnight TV show, produced, as was the radio show, by Ovaltine, the chocolate drink. And when it went into syndication, Ovaltine was no longer part of it. But Ovaltine, at that point, I guess, owned the name Captain Midnight. So they redubbed, who knows, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 10 years of this show with a new name. So I was watching this exciting adventure show about a flyer named Jet Jackson.
Okay, I've heard of that one. I don't think I've ever seen it.
And that's and that was Captain Midnight. Now it didn't involve the flight suit or anything like that. It was, again, an aviator.
Yeah.
Whose sidekick was named something like Sticky Mud or something like that. And wholesome is radical. Put that on a t-shirt and sell it, Jay. I see some return to that, to, if not wholesome, at least to all ages entertainment. So I'm less concerned, but he's right. It was, for the longest time, dark and grim and gritty. That was the way to go. And you can't even talk about it without dropping your voice. Which is why Michael Keaton talked that way. Anyway, neither here nor they. So Jet Jackson was, like I say, he had a sidekick, I think, had a name like Sticky Mud or Stinky Mud or something stupid. Little wise guy, and a young lady, I don't remember. They weren't from the radio or comics, or as far as I know.
Okay.
But they just had air adventures. I mean, it might as well have been Steve Canyon or any one of the flying heroes.
Yeah.
None of which I can mention other than Steve Canyon, but
Terry and the Pirates, things like that.
Yeah, I guess. Sure. No, I mean, definitely Terry, but they're Hop Harrigan, people like that.
Yes.
I know way too much about stuff I've never actually seen. Although the DC library was a great place to disappear for hours. They had all the bound editions.
I could just dream about hanging out in a place like that. I mean, I've always been more of a Gold and Silver Age fan. I mean, my favorite characters right there, Dr. Fate.
He's a good character. I never got to work with him, unfortunately.
Yeah. I've always loved magic characters, and and Dr. Fate was, I love that concept that inside his helmet is another entity basically telling him what to do. Kind of like,
I don't know if that was, I've never read any of I've read very few of the originals.
There was, I got to go back and look at it again. I don't know if that was a revamp, but I believe they referred to Naboo in the original.
Oh no, yeah, he was there. He was this, a voice in the air, entity. But I don't recall. He might have. I'm saying he wasn't.
I don't remember in the original if he was in the helmet, but I like concept.
I've seen exactly probably 3 of those stories reprinted in the big dollar comics in the 70s.
I gotta go back. I have reprints of the origins somewhere.
Although one of my favorite, just to give credit, one of my favorite Dr. Fate stories was the DC one shot that my buddy, the late great Marty Pasco, wrote with Walt Simonson's art, that sort of revamped the hero for modern times. He set the template for the character for a while. I mean, he had his own book and stuff later, but in probably the 80s or 70s, he was just the one reprint. I mean, one news story and then a lot of reprint. But no, he's a good character, and I, like you, I'm drawn to those characters, like Doctor Strange, obviously. I don't know much about Mandrake the Magician, although, again, one of my dad's favorites.
I got into him. I got into all those characters actually because of the cartoon in the 80s, Defenders of the Earth.
Oh, sure.
And that's where I discovered Mandrake and the Phantom and Flash Gordon Flash I knew about, and the Phantom because they ran in the newspaper that my uncle got, but Mandrake didn't run in there. So I learned more about him from.
Well, when I was growing up, Chicago was a good newspaper town. So we had 2, big bed sheet, the Tribune, which is still around, and the American, and they had great comics. So I got to see the later iterations of Flash, certainly Dick Tracy, the Phantom, of course, Lee Falk and Cy Berry. I edited the Phantom at DC for a while.
Oh, really? Gotta see. I have a lot of Phantom comic books. He's one of my all-time favorites too. I actually, do I have it here or is it behind me? Where is it? Oh, it's behind me. You won't. My studio's a mess, but I have a.
It looks reasonably neat. Oh,
well,
okay.
my
Now,
back table. You
now
can
we're
see,
seeing the back table. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, you see the back table, and there's the Phantom. I don't know if you could tell. My stuff.
I see the figure. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I got that there along with.
Well, if you bought any of the DC titles, I started
Yeah.
editing around the 10th issue, and
Okay. Yeah, no, I have a lot of, and almost anything Phantom. I think I have all the as many.
so I
as
forgot.
I can find.
When talking about the heritage,
Mhm.
I forgot newspaper strips because,
Yeah.
Nowadays I don't think I see them in newspapers anymore. But my buddy
Yeah.
Joe Staten took over Dick Tracy
Yeah.
a few years ago, and
Yeah, which I love.
I read it online.
hmm
It
I
was
do
a good
that a
throw.
lot too. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a nice little hanging up on my drawing table, a little autographed piece of Dick Tracy from him.
He's a good guy.
Oh, I love his work, but
I don't know if he still does. He used to live up your way somewhere.
he lives about an hour or so, maybe an hour and a half north of me.
Upstate, further upstate.
Where I grew up, he was about 45 minutes from.
Ah.
So I don't know, and I'm now closer to where I live. I'm closer to New York City, so I added like I said, maybe an extra 45 minutes, another hour or so to the drive. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm a huge strip fan. I've always told people I prefer strips to comic books. I mean, I always, growing up, before I got into comic books, I read comic strips, and I loved the serialness of the story. So every day my dad would have the paper or something, I'd get the comics, and if they had something, say Flash Gordon or Dick Tracy, I'd be reading those, and every day I'd get my story. When you're looking at a humor strip like Beetle Bailey or something, it's not usually story like, it's just good humor, but certain characters are on certain day, or they may have a theme go throughout the week that kind of things relate, but it's not a story.
Well, in the 60s, the comedy strips just was more of the same. They didn't do even themes. I mean, years later when Garfield would have a week of bothering the dog or whatever, that was as close as continuity came. But I mean, like I say, I grew up in a great newspaper town, so the American and the Tribune both had 2 pages, full bed sheet size paper. And, for me as a little kid, I could only read it on the floor.
Yeah.
So I'm that illustration I'm sure we've seen 1,000 times of the little guy reading the comics page from a newspaper. And then, we get the color comics from at least 2 of those papers. The Puck's Comic Weekly. I don't even know what that means, but that was the name of the Tribune strips on Sunday. So talk about obscure. You're talking to the wrong guy, because I know too much crap.
Oh, that's great. I can sit. I don't know if you know, because I know I don't know if he colored just for Marvel, if he colored DC stuff. But do you know John Wilcox?
I know the name. I may have met him. I don't. Yeah.
He's a friend of mine. He's this guy knows like everybody and everything about comics, and his strip knowledge, his comic book knowledge. I'll have conversations with him. So he's one of my favorite people to talk to. He's like, you know about this strip? No. And then I'm like talking to him. I'm on my computer looking things up, and I'm like, oh my, like every conversation I have with him, I leave learning about a new strip that I have to now go search and look up.
I do have an awful lot of collections.
Yeah.
Either in magazine format, Kitchen Sink did a bunch of that stuff, or hardback. Thanks to DC, I have a number of the Superman and Batman dailies that they republished, the Sundays. Years and years ago, when I was at DC, before Impact, they got the Gold's Group got the TSR license, and that led to a fairly successful couple of years of Forgotten Realms and Dungeons and Dragons and the related titles.
Yep.
And we discovered at the beginning of the negotiations that the family that owned TSR at that point also owned Buck Rogers.
Oh.
Now, the way of this was that the original syndicate, again, stop me if this is just too much nonsense.
No. I'm interested.
The Madame Fatale, not my favorite, Jay. Although unique in all of comics forever and ever. Do you know who Madame Fatale is?
I've heard the name.
It's a guy who dressed as an old woman.
Okay.
That was his costume.
Okay.
Anyway, so we went out to Wisconsin from New York, where TSR was based, and the origin of their ownership was that John F. Dilley owned the syndicate that originally did a lot of newspaper stuff, and including comics, and they bought the concept for Buck Rogers from Philip Nolan, who wrote the original short story.
Okay.
And so they hired him to write the strip, but so they just continued to own him because the Dilley family then bought TSR.
Okay.
So among the things we dealt with was the desire to do a Buck Rogers comic. DC was doing the Phantom. They had done a couple of Flash Gordon shorts, miniseries.
Yeah.
And it would have been a great compliment, and it was handed to me. I wasn't a gamer, so I didn't know that stuff well. But I was part of that group, and so we went through development and on that stuff. And Ed Barreto, the Uruguayan cartoonist who did Teen Titans, went on to do The Shadow for me. Was a classic comic strip fan, and I had him do concept art that was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think we put a writer in the picture, and we got really close, and then it fell apart because the family decided they wanted to get a movie going, and they never did.
Yeah.
But we also never got a comic going.
Yeah.
But it would have been great, and it would have been in a classic sense.
Oh.
So as a result of that, the one thing I came away with was like 50 years of Buck Rogers, which featured, a giant hardcover that featured all of the original strips, at least the black and white, the dailies, all the way to the 1970s, I think.
Wow.
So it was art from Phil Calkins, the original artist, and so on and so forth, through a lot of the comic strip guys like Murphy Anderson, blanking on who all else did it, not Mort Meskin, but some of those really good in the 50s. Yeah. But Murphy Anderson, who also one of my friends from the past at DC, down into, I think, Gray Morrow and a few others who did some TV era, when he was on TV with Annoying Little Robot and Wilma Deering in those pants we all went steady with, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Oh, you smile. Apparently you've never seen the show.
Oh, no, I've seen the show. I actually, when the pandemic started, I found it on the Sci-Fi Channel app.
Oh, is that right?
I watched
Tweaky. Yeah.
I think I watched an entire season before the app started messing up on me.
So the pants that we all went steady with,
yes,
resonates with you.
Oh yes. I mean, I was a kid when it was on,
in a nasty way.
I got a new appreciation for it as an adult.
That's what comics are for.
Yeah, man, I love all that stuff. I love like.
So we are what I call omni-geeks.
Yes, I like.
I mean, we devour everything.
Yes, I love it. Gary Morrow is God.
Gray Morrow. He's gone on to heaven, so
yeah,
it may be.
But yeah, no, I like that term, omni-geek. I'm gonna have to remember that and use
to the degree that I'm aware. I coined it. Just like being omnivorous, we have devoured everything happily.
Yes. You know what?
Oh, I never answered his question.
I was going to get to that because I think we need to wrap up soon. Just because of time over.
I'm sorry.
For me.
I will.
No. Listen, I'm having tons of fun, and I'm sure I could talk to you for hours. But we live on different coasts, and it's different.
Yeah, it's a lot
times
easier
here.
for me. And
Yeah, so
trying to figure what time is it where you are?
uh,
Oh, it's like
about
10:15.
Yeah, I kind of have a little early day tomorrow. I want to, you know.
And you're not as old as I am, but you're old.
Oh, I'm very old. I threw my back out by sneezing a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so I'm out there.
I've been in a room when other people have sneezed and thrown my back out, so there's no future waiting for you.
Light up compared to early, and then so I hope you were doing.
He thought my eyes didn't light up. I think it's just
I don't know. I'm
change of light.
So I was doing terrible. I guess I don't know. Maybe. But
I'm not aware what he's talking about. It may just be the drugs kicking in.
But I listen. I'd love to have you back. I'm going to let you know that right now.
Glad to do it. As you can see, I'm technologically capable.
But let's go to Jay's question. Who is Brian's favorite off-the-wall PD character?
Well, thanks to his reference to Madame Fatale, I guess what he means by off the wall is truly weird.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Madame Fatale is pretty doggone weird. I'm trying to think. I've seen some. Let me quickly access my phone. I stored a bunch of covers not long ago of what I thought were weird characters. I can do this fairly quickly. He says, as he does it very not quickly.
It's okay. Here I'm actually looking for something. Where is it here?
Well, I don't know. There are characters who are PD now who are just like, what? There's a guy named the Ferret, who I think was just an animal-based crime fighter, but he was small. The hero himself was small, and maybe because of the artist's ability, the original artist's ability, kind of goofy looking.
Yeah.
And I think that the term ferret has taken on a different meaning over the years. And that may be why that occurs to me. But there are no shortage of these truly the guys went to work one day and said, well, all the good stuff is taken.
Yeah.
And they start, but Madame Fatale is not only completely off the wall, but that somebody was either smoking something or was suffering a head wound of some sort, because there was something insidiously clever and kind of scary weird about, not about the character. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
But about the idea that someone created that and thought, kids will love a transvestite hero who we now know of as someone who looked like what was the name of that? Madam, the puppet, the one ventriloquist.
Oh, yes.
I mean, he dressed up as a crone in an evening gown. Yeah, makes sense. I will give special shout out in this, and then we'll wrap it to Fletcher Hanks's stuff. Stardust, the intergalactic Avenger character, and Phantoma, the jungle demoness hero. They read like acid trips, or what I've never had an acid trip, but I feel like afterwards I have that hangover. Charles Biro was weird. I guess Crime Buster wasn't a bad character. Daredevil, the original Daredevil. And then didn't Biro go on to, if not create and popularize, the truly awful crime comics? I mean, the decapitations and, bloody wound crime comics.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm not too sure. I'm better with the artwork sometimes than I am with the names of the people.
So. Well, Biro drew I think drew covers. He was an artist, but a writer.
Yeah.
And for Lev Gleason, oh my God, this stuff, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but all of a sudden Lev Gleason shows up out of my mouth. They later did like Crime Does Not Pay, which was the precursor of all of the crime comics that eventually led to, you know, EC getting in trouble with gore and all that. In fact, one of Byro's collaborators was the comic artist who went on to Bender and killed his girlfriend at a New York hotel.
Yeah. Untold
Tales for Future. Comic book Babylon.
Before we get going, I just want to show this picture. I shared it. You know, I posted this on social media. Jay posted this as a picture I did. And I'm
sorry, I'm not looking at portfolios today.
No, it's humorous public domain characters I'm going to be sharing with you guys. So that Jay is using and working on.
Like
so I'm going to be doing some humorous stuff. So Airboy and the Heap here.
Hanna-Barbera style.
Yeah, very Hanna-Barbera.
I like it. I like it.
Black Bat and Super American. He goes, I'm torturing Brian. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm the bat that is okay with guns. Nice.
Comic book Babylon, even better than term than Omni Geek. I just wanted to share this because I'm such a fan of public domain. I got some stuff in my head in the works, but I'm going to be doing some stuff for Jay and Chris with some humorous public domain takes.
Well, so, I'll be honest with you. I love the playground. I realize I haven't done enough in that playground. I'm always looking for ways to do more with Jay or others. Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything right this second. Jay's got a Atomic Thunderbolt thing that we cooked up that, as far as I know, he's never drawn. So now I'm torturing him back, and but I like it. And no, he wasn't. You actually weren't torturing me, Jay. So don't worry. And he and I have talked about the Raven, a character I love, because I love that street level hero type stuff. So yeah, we'll I want to do more, and my creative juices are not running down. Although nowadays I'm not quite turning into petroleum, but in a lot of areas I'm a dinosaur. So I'm still getting work, but no, I'm talking about people's take. Oh, he did stuff years ago. On the other hand, I will be able to travel forever on Gotham by Gaslight. So.
All right. I'm gonna wrap up in a second, but do you mind if I have you hang out backstage real quick?
No, not at all.
All right. I want to
remember it's early for me. So.
Yeah. I want to thank you for coming on. I really did have a lot of fun. I'm sure there's so much more we can talk about.
I'd love to do that. You may need to structure to keep me quiet, but
it's okay. I'll bring Jay on. Jay won't let anyone talk, right, Jay? He's got his.
Well, it's when Jay says let's have a phone call.
Yeah.
He'll text me or whatever, and I go, yeah, sure. I just go and get comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna love what I hear.
Yeah.
I'm gonna enjoy it, but I will contribute virtually nothing because Jay is, as I said at the top, I'll say it again. He is tirelessly creative.
Yes.
And the stuff he wants to do, and the things that I just I'm in awe very often, and certainly in sync with him.
Yeah. He's very passionate. That's a great word for him. Very passionate about what he does, and you hear it when you talk to him.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, he's sometimes he gets a little close to cutting out letters from magazines to create letters, but signed, unsigned. No, I kid.
Yeah.
All right. I'd love to do it again, Michael.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on. I'm gonna drop you backstage for a minute. I'll talk to you in a moment. All right. So you guys, everyone, thanks for tuning in. This was such a fun conversation for me. I had tons of fun. I learned a few things that I didn't know, even about public domain. So this was always, I always have a fun time when I'm learning something. Brian, if you haven't seen any of the work that we mentioned of his previous stuff with DC or Marvel, go check that stuff out. Everything's in trades now, and make sure the Kickstarter that's happening. I will post. I should have posted a link in the comments. Give me 1 second. Let me do that for you guys here if I can find the internet again. It's important that I want you guys going on because, number one, between Brian's writing and Jay's art, you're going to be incredibly impressed. Number two, you got to support the indie comics. That's what we're about here, supporting comics in general. And what better than to support some public domain stuff that you could get inspired, that has history behind it. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, on Twitter, it's at Brian Augustyn, or Brian Augustyn on Facebook. Go look him up, follow him. And next week, I'm going to be back. I'm going to have, I'm sorry, my phone keeps going off here, which is driving me crazy. I'm going to have, Keith Gleason next week, who's Mighty Mascots, if you guys aren't familiar with his work. It's a great comic. We'll be talking to Keith next week, so tune in 8:30 on Tuesday. Tomorrow night, find me on Catch the Craze. It's their 300th episode. We're having a live sketch-off with some artists. I'll be one of 8 artists doing a sketch-off. And this weekend, I don't know the date yet. I got to get it. Eternal Con out in Long Island. I'll be on a panel, Ramon Gill's panel on. It's basically going to be critiquing artwork and storytelling and stuff. Nothing bad, but it's fun. I've done it before. I love Ramon and the work that he does in the indie world. And this panel is very educational for anyone who's trying to break into comics to learn about storytelling, panel to panel, things like that. So I will see you guys next week. You guys have a great rest of your week, man. Bye.